Welcome to another episode of the original story of your childhood cartoons. In this episode, I'm going to tell you the second part of Coraline. If you haven't seen the previous part, the link will appear up here, and you can watch it. Are you ready to hear the rest of the story? If you dare, watch the video till the end. Last time, I did a summary of the movie and went over the first 6 chapters of the book. Today, I'll cover the last 7 chapters and some real-life things that inspired Neil Gaiman, the author. There's a lot of interesting info in this episode that will make watching the movie even better, so stick around until the end. First, I need to correct a big mistake I made in the last episode. For some reason, I called the other mother the Beldam, instead of her real name, the Beldam. Someone pointed it out in the comments quickly, but by then the video was already uploaded, and I wasn't going to redo the whole thing. I'm not sure how I missed that mistake, even though I've read the book twice and watched the movie several times recently, but thanks to those who corrected me politely. Now, in case you're wondering, Beldam means an evil and ugly woman, usually an old one or a witch. While Neil Gaiman created his own version of the Belle Dame in Coraline, there are some stories and myths that might have inspired him, but I'll get into that later once we finish the book so we can connect the dots. Stay until the end, and you'll be glad you did. When we left off, Coraline had angered the Beldam, who locked her in a small room behind a mirror. While exploring the tiny room, Coraline found the ghosts of 3 children who were also trapped there. The ghost children told her the Beldam took their hearts, souls, and lives when she sewed buttons into their eyes and left them behind. They warned Coraline that she'd suffer the same fate if she didn't escape. They described how the Beldam would steal everything from her until she was just a shell of herself, like a forgotten dream. Sounds scary, right? You might be wondering why the Beldam sewed buttons into their eyes. Well, as the saying goes, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Coraline was terrified but couldn't do anything at the time, so she made herself as comfortable as possible in the small room and fell asleep. In the next chapter, the Beldam lets her out, saying she didn't want to lock her up, but Coraline had been rude. You might remember in the movie, it's not the Beldam who frees Coraline from the room, but the other version of her neighbor, Wybie. Wybie isn't in the book. He was added to the movie to make the story longer. While sitting in the kitchen with the Beldam, Coraline remembers the cat's advice. If she wants to save her parents, she should challenge the Beldam to a game where they're the prize. The Beldam loves games, so she agrees. If Coraline can find her parents and the souls of the Beldam's past victims, everyone goes free. If not, Coraline must stay forever. Coraline starts searching right away. With help from the Adderstone, she finds the first soul in the toy box in her other bedroom. Then, she goes to the other Miss Spink's theater, which is now empty with dog bats hanging from the ceiling, and finds the second soul in a cocoon. This scene is pretty similar to the movie, where Coraline is grossed out reaching for the soul and is then attacked by the monstrous old ladies and dog bats. But she escapes. Outside, Coraline sees the Beldam waiting, annoyed. The Beldam suggests Coraline check the front apartment. Coraline suspects a trap, but agrees, and the Beldam gives her the key. In the front of the house, Coraline finds a crawl space where her other father has become a big, shapeless blob. At first, he tries to help her, but the Beldam's control forces him to attack. Coraline escapes by ripping out his button eyes so he can't see, and she sneaks away. In the movie, this happens in the Beldam's garden, but in the book, it's in the basement. Also, in the movie, Coraline gets a soul from him, but in the book, it's just a trap. After that, Coraline heads to the other Mr. Bobo's apartment to find the third and final soul. She sees it glowing inside his coat, but when she tries to grab it, dozens of rats spill out. One of them has the soul, and she chases it down the stairs. She thinks she's lost it, but then notices the cat has killed the rat and holds the soul under its paw. Coraline thanks the cat and puts the soul in her pocket. With all three souls collected and the false world starting to fall apart, Coraline enters the house again. This next part happens similarly in both the book and movie. Coraline shows the Beldam the three souls and guesses where her parents are. She knows they're in the snow globe, but pretends to guess elsewhere to distract the Beldam. While the Beldam is turned away, Coraline grabs the snow globe, throws the cat at the Beldam's face, and runs for the door, taking the key with her. The ghosts help her close the door, trapping the Beldam in the other world. Coraline runs back home through the corridor, but in the book, this passage is described in more detail. Neil Gaiman writes that as Coraline touches the walls, they feel like fur, breathing and moving, and later they feel hot and wet, like the inside of a mouth. The passageway is much older than the other mother, deep and slow, and it knows Coraline is there. Just imagine, after escaping from a monster, having to pass through something so creepy on the way home. Luckily, Coraline and the cat made it back to her world safely, and she apologized to the cat for using him as a weapon. While staring out the window, Coraline felt a new appreciation for the world she once found boring and fell asleep in an uncomfortable chair. In Chapter 12, Coraline wakes up to see her real parents standing over her, but they don't remember being trapped in the snow globe. However, they seem more caring than before, which makes Coraline think the Beldam might have been influencing them. That night, they had dinner together, an odd pizza with green peppers, meatballs, and pineapple, which Coraline ate except for the pineapple. After dinner, Coraline went to bed and dreamed of the ghost children, who told her that her mission wasn't over. The Beldam had lied about playing fair. When Coraline closed the door to the other world, she trapped the Beldam's right hand, but now the hand was determined to get the key. Coraline quickly came up with a plan to get rid of the hand for good. She went to the old well on her property and moved the wooden planks covering it. Then, she set up a fake tea party over the well's opening and placed the key on the tablecloth. She loudly told Miss Spink that she was going to have a tea party, making sure the hand could hear. Coraline then watched as the hand followed her to the well. When the hand grabbed the key, it fell into the well, just as Coraline had planned. She covered the well again, trapping the hand for good, and that night, she slept soundly in her real bed. That was the end of Coraline's story, but there's more to know. Neil Gaiman started writing Coraline in 1990 while living in England. Surprisingly, he wrote this scary story for his 5-year-old daughter, Holly, who loved spooky things. He took a 6-year break when his family moved to America, but picked it up again so his youngest daughter, Maddie, wouldn't be too old for it. He started it for Holly, but finished it for Maddie. The house in Coraline was based on Gaiman's house in England, so Holly could imagine where everything was. The door with bricks behind it, like in the story, existed in Gaiman's childhood home, separating the servant quarters from the family's part of the house. Fun fact: the main character's name was originally supposed to be Caroline, but Gaiman made a typo, writing Coraline instead, and liked it better. As for the Beldam, Gaiman hasn't said much about what inspired her, but some think she's based on traditional fairy tales or a poem by John Keats from 1819. The poem La Belle Dame Sans Merci, which means the beautiful woman without mercy, tells the story of a knight who meets a beautiful woman in a meadow and falls in love with her. But one night, while staying with her, he is visited by the ghosts of past kings and princes who warn him that she's tricking him. The poem ends sadly, with the knight being abandoned by the woman and trapped in the false world she created to lure him there. Sounds familiar, right? Although in the poem the woman is after men, not children, the rest of it is pretty similar. She creates a fake world to trap her victims, pretends to care about them, and the knight is warned by the ghosts of previous victims. Now, there's no actual evidence that Neil Gaiman used this poem or any specific folklore as inspiration for Coraline, but the similarities are interesting. It could just be a coincidence, but it seems like a pretty big one. So, what do you think? Does the poem remind you of Coraline? And which version of the story do you like more, the book or the movie? Personally, I prefer the book because it has a more positive message for kids while being even creepier than the movie. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with other Coraline fans.